perhaps the highest national standard of living in the world. Sir Roy Walensky, the former Prime Minister of the Central African Federation, which included what is now Rhodesia, once said, "This man Smith has an appeal. It's the appeal of an easy life. For $6,000 a year, you can have 5 servants, a swimming pool, and a lot." Beginning during the early 1960s, however, the Zimbabwean nationalist forces under the leadership of the Zimbabwe African National Union, ZANU, evolved the strategy of guerrilla war to liberate their people and land. It is proving to be very successful. There are 20,000 guerrillas in base camps in Tanzania and Mozambique, over 3,000 in Zimbabwe itself, and this number is continually rising. In a meeting between Stephen Solars, a U.S. congressman, and the ZANU guerrilla leaders, they were reported to reject the possibility of enlisting the assistance of Cuban or other foreign troops, declaring that if we cannot liberate ourselves, we do not deserve to be liberated. Despite Western propaganda to the effect that the U.S. and British only wish to avoid a bloodshed in Rhodesia, don't forget the Zimbabweans have been bleeding for almost a century, their real fear is that the liberation struggle will win. With this victory in sight, it is not surprising that the counterattack by the Smith regime has become more vicious and brutal. Actually, this must have been published pre-1980, because this is when Smith was still in power in Rhodesia. More than 250,000 rural Zimbabweans have been forced into concentration camps. Terrorist raids have been conducted against Zimbabwean refugees in Mozambique. Dusk to dawn shoot-on-sight curfews have been instituted and enforced in the border areas. And escalating counterinsurgency attacks have been launched against the military arm of the liberation struggle, the Zimbabwean People's Army, ZIPA. It is crucial for Westerners to understand that the Smith regime has not stood alone in this barbaric campaign. This pamphlet documents the critically important element in U.S. imperialism's support for the Smith regime, white mercenary reinforcements for the fascist Rhodesian, quote, security forces. This flow of U.S. mercenaries to prop up white Rhodesia is an important, though secret, part of U.S. imperialism's strategy for Africa. The U.S. has massive investments in southern Africa. Zimbabwe alone supplies the bulk of high-grade chrome ore used in the U.S. for jet engines and other advanced technological items. Coal, copper, and other minerals are ripped out of Zimbabwe for U.S. industry. Mobil Oil, Texaco, Hertz Rent-A-Cars, Holiday Inns, and many other U.S. corporations operate illegally in Rhodesia through foreign subsidiaries. More important still is South Africa, the fortress of U.S. interests in Africa, where $1.5 billion is invested by GM, IBM, Ford, and other giant multinational corporations. The liberation of Zimbabwe would, for the first time, penetrate the buffer zone of satellite countries protecting the borders of South Africa. South African guerrilla fighters, who are already training by the thousands in camps in Tanzania and Zambia, would have direct access to re-enter their land and accelerate the liberation struggle. Knowing that the stakes are high, U.S. imperialism has worked to strengthen the white supremacist outposts in Africa, although at times this had to be done covertly. In 1970, the Nixon White House approved Henry Kissinger's Operation Tar Baby strategy, based on Option 2 of the Secret National Security Study Memorandum Number 39. This strategy essentially called for covert military assistance, including direct exchanges to the South African troops to be trained in Iraq.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Happy Friday, TGIF, Shabbat Shalom, Juma Mubarak, whatever it may be for you. It's Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. And we've got a big shoe for you today. In the first hour here, I want to just bring up, some stuff about Bannon and premeditated murder and DeSantis and Greg Abbott and 7 things that happen when you stop eating meat or eat less meat during the pandemic. We'll get to that. And in our second hour, we're going to get into cleaner air and what that has to do with decarbonizing the economy during a pandemic. Is Trump going to continue to hide the truth by pardoning Michael Flynn? And in our third hour, we're getting into Trump and his intelligence agencies and his science experts in, his role in causing as many as 100,000 Americans to die by the end of the summer. And a journalist, the Pence folks are going after a journalist. We'll talk about that in our third hour. So just to start out, Steve Bannon went on Sinclair Television with Eric Bolling and accused China of, quote, premeditated murder. Yesterday, Trump was asked about, did this come out of a Chinese laboratory? And he said that he's seen evidence of that. And then the reporter said, well, what evidence? Well, I can't tell you. Literally, he said, I can't tell you that. So, excuse me, whether or not this came out of China or came out of a lab in China, and if it did, the theory is actually Trump raised the question of whether it was intentionally released. Right? He literally raised that question, which is like, talk about breaching diplomacy. But in any case, the idea that the Chinese would intentionally release a virus that would attack and kill thousands of their own citizens in the same town where the lab is located is laughable, right? It makes no sense at all. I mean, if you're going to commit biowarfare on somebody else, you release the pathogen on their property, not your property. I mean, this is like fails the common sense test. So, and all the scientists are telling us, you look at the DNA of this virus, and in fact, there's a lengthy piece in the New York Times yesterday afternoon that has, graphics and things and lays it all out. You look at the DNA of this virus, and it's clear that it came, from a bat in a wet market. And it's just like, so anyhow, Trump is trying to do this. So, but it raises the question, if Trump is accusing China of premeditated, or Bannon is accusing China of premeditated murder, Trump is accusing them of possibly having done it on purpose, what does that say about Donald Trump? Donald Trump, who was warned in November by his spy agencies. In fact, our government warned Israel that this was coming in November. Presumably they warned other countries as well, but in Israel it's leaked. And it's in the Israeli press. In November, we had satellite images showing that something was going on in Wuhan. We had spies on the ground, and those spies said, there's a virus that's ripping through this town, and Wuhan's a big town, 10 million people. It's much larger than Detroit, I believe, but it's sort of the Detroit of China. It's manufacturing floor, as it were. So does that mean that, if Trump decided, after having been warned in November, warned in December, well, in December was when China acknowledged that they had a crisis, and then by the first week of January, they had released the genome. They had decoded the genome of this virus, and they had released it to the world, so that by the first week, at the end of the first week of January, the World Health Organization there was a German company that was putting together a test kit for coronavirus, and the World Health Organization had signed off on it. By the second or third week of January, those test kits were available and being shipped to over 60 countries. But we didn't, Trump didn't want to buy test kits from a German company, so we'll have Americans do it. And, basically nothing happened for a month. And here we have, 60,000 officially, over 60,000 dead Americans. And, all the science indicates that this is a dramatic undercount. California officials, this is amazing. I think this is the same logic that Trump is following, which is this whole herd immunity thing. I went off on a long rant about it I think it was last Friday or maybe last Thursday. And that the only way to explain what the Trump administration and red state governors are doing is that they're going for herd immunity. They think that herd immunity is the way to resolve this, because then people can get back to work because they're now immune. And yeah, you're going to lose some people, but hey, that's the price you pay. The billionaires want the economy started back up again. And here, this is Antioch, California. Ken Turnage II is the chair of the planning commission in this town. He's not like a big-time politician. He's a small-time politician. But he posted on April 23rd on his Facebook page that the coronavirus is like a forest fire that burns, quote, old trees, fallen brush, and shrub sucklings, end quote. that drain resources, adding that society will strengthen when this pandemic is all settled. Right, Sky Palma over at Raw Story. This is the exact quote from the Facebook page. Quote, this from this, California official. We would have significant loss of life. We would lose many elderly. That would reduce burdens in our defunct Social Security system. It would reduce our health care costs once the wave subsided. It would make jobs available for others, and it would also free up housing of which we are in dire need. We would lose a large portion of the people with immune and other health complications. I know it would be loved ones as well, but that would once again reduce our impact on medical, jobs, and housing. Right, we just need to make some housing available. Kill off the old people. Take their houses. Some of the responses, one person said, except we're not trees and dead human beings don't fertilize the living. Another said, this was the favored position of the Nazis, getting rid of the useless eaters, they called it. This, by the way, is true. The first mass killings by the Nazis were in psychiatric facilities. And, they were, before again, from this person who was responding, getting rid of the useless eaters, they called it, before the Nazis went after the Jews and Gypsies and the Polish, they decided it'd be a good idea to get rid of the useless eaters, the old, demented, disabled, mentally ill, physically ill, and institutionalized, which is absolutely right. So this is what we've got, right? We've got this herd immunity, and then on the other side, you got blue states, like here in Oregon, where we're trying to stamp out the virus. These are very different visions of how to respond. And it's creating a crisis for our country because we have no unified response. We've got the White House and the red states saying we're going to go for herd immunity. We're going to get as many people sick as we can deal with as rapidly as we can and try to spread this through the population so we can hit that 60, 70, 80%, once had it target. And they're encouraged by what looks like, a fact coming out of some of the research out of China and Europe that as many as half and maybe even as many as 60% of people who get the virus actually have an infection and never show any symptoms. But for 2 weeks, they're walking around shedding virus like there's no tomorrow. They're what are called silent spreaders. They look perfectly normal. They feel perfectly normal. But they're spraying virus all over the place as they're talking and breathing and jogging and whatever it may be. So, it's pretty amazing stuff. When we come back to the break, I want to talk about 7 things that happen to your body when we quit eating meat, and we'll take your calls. It's Anything Goes Friday.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
15 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. It's the Thom Hartmann Program live from Portland, Oregon. Stick around. And welcome back. Samuel in Santa Ana, California. Hey, Samuel, what's on your mind today? Thanks for listening to KPFK.
Hey, Tom. Yeah, I'm a shareholder in the company. I've registered more than 1,000 people to vote. You and I have spoken a few times in the past. I tried to reach out to Congressman Pocock, what I think is a phenomenal concept. There's the Black Caucus, there's a Progressive Caucus. We need to have a medical caucus whose sole responsibility, whose sole goal is going to be universal health care. And I think that could even get some bipartisan...
There is a caucus like that within the Democratic Party. There is a health care caucus.
Okay. Well, the second thing I was going to ask him to do was I would like him to call on the AMA to do more than just a press release. They did one on April the 14th condemning Trump's position with the WHO. I'd like him to ask them to actually do a news conference, to have some people talk to them, because the CDC, they can't directly take on Trump. NIH can't directly take on Trump, but the AMA could definitely do it because they're a private organization. Trump is a paper tiger. Trump is far more unpowerful than he looks. After 100,000 people are dead, Trump's ratings are going to drop in the 30s. After 250,000 are dead, they're going to drop.
They already are.
20. Yeah, well, but I'm saying they're going to, he's going to get booed.
He's going to go out like Herbert Hoover did I think it's increasingly looking that way, which makes Joe Biden's vice presidential pick even more critical.
Yeah, exactly. And we know that's going to be Elizabeth Warren. So the thing I'm saying is Trump is going on history piece. Trump, no, I know. I'm telling you, Trump is going down the way Robespierre went down in France. I think you would know who Robespierre was. He's literally going to be jealous of George McGovern by the time this thing happens.
Yeah. Although Maximilian Robespierre was, the leader of a revolution, essentially. He started out as the good guy, and then he turned into the maniacal ass that, at the end. Well, I guess there's some analogies there. There's some parallels.
Oh, there most definitely are. One other thing I want to pull your coat to.
Terrors.
Yeah, exactly. The terrorists, exactly. One other thing I want to pull your coat to.
That's what the French called it.
Yeah, I remember. The reign of terror. One other thing I want to pull your coat to is that we are dramatically undercounting the deaths that are coming. If we've gone from 2,000 deaths to 60,000 deaths in 30 days, my calculations say that if we go in the same trajectory, that we are going to be at about approximately 1,800,000 deaths. I doubt if we're actually going to do that, but if we're doubling, the way
I think here's how it's going to play out. Samuel, keep in mind, even red states have been not locked down quite like some of the blue states. I mean, there's 6 or 7 red states that have never issued any kind of orders at all. But most of the red states, particularly the larger ones, Ohio, Texas, things like that, actually have been in lockdown now for 5, 6, 7 weeks. And the result of that, and they're opening now. So what's going to happen is that 60,000 deaths is going to plateau or flatten out somewhat for about 2 or 3 weeks. And it's probably going to flatten out somewhere between 70 and 90,000 people. And then it's going to shoot up again. It's going to shoot up again in early June or late May. And, as a consequence of all these openings. We'll see where it goes, but it's not going to be linear going forward. And this is going to lull a lot of people into a false sense of security. We'll be right back. It's coming up on 20 minutes past the hour. Our 1-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. We have a new video over at thomhartmann.com for the people who support our program, and it's an interesting one. The phrase, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, has a really interesting history. And the exploitation of that phrase and that history by right-wingers in 20th century America, or late 20th century America, now 21st century America, also has a fascinating and rather grim history. Just the general absurdity of the idea that somebody can lift themselves off the ground by reaching down and pulling on a strap on their boots. Just think about it for a second. But this is used as justification by right-wingers, particularly over the last 40 years since the Reagan Revolution, to say, poor people, their poverty is their own fault. Check it out. It's over at thomhartmann.com. Care system. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. I wanted to quickly go through some of these, things. We're looking at Donald Trump risking the lives of thousands of people. Over 100,000 people work in the meatpacking industry nationwide. I think it's 137,000. And, he's basically demanding that these meat places stay open. That these meat packing, which is basically where they're cutting up carcasses. And so, if you check out, Forks Over Knives is this brilliant movie that came out of, I believe it came out of the Cleveland Clinic, or at least it features the Cleveland Clinic, which is, a world-famous medical institution up there with, like, the Mayo Clinic. And what they found, they were doing this research decades ago, and they found that vegetarians had less heart disease, and then they found that vegans had way less heart disease, and then they found that people with heart disease could actually see that reversed when they put them on a vegan diet. So they have over on their website at forksovernines.com 7 things that happen when you stop eating meat. Number 1, you reduce inflammation in your body. And we're not talking about the short-term inflammation, you know, like a wound or something. But this is chronic inflammation, which causes our atherosclerosis, you know, hardening the arteries, heart attacks, strokes, diabetes, and autoimmune diseases, among other things. Plant-based diets are naturally anti-inflammatory, high in fiber, antioxidants, and phytonutrients. They lower the inflammation or the inflammatory triggers, but like saturated fat and endotoxins, which are found in meat. Number 1. Number 2, your blood cholesterol levels will plummet. They will fall radically. Number 3, you'll give your microbiome a makeover. The bugs in your gut will get healthier and things will work better, shall we say. Number 4, you'll change how your genes work. Going on a plant-based diet actually, along with other lifestyle changes, can actually lengthen your telomeres. In other words, lengthen your life. These are the genes that determine how long we live. Number 5, you'll dramatically reduce your chances of getting type 2 diabetes, which 38% of Americans have or are pre-diabetic. Animal protein, they write, especially red and processed meat, has been shown in study after study after study to reduce the risk of type 2 diabetes. Number 6, you'll get the right amount and the right type of protein. Contrary to popular perception, meat is not the only source of protein. And in fact, vegetable protein is a higher quality than meat. And number 7, you'll make a huge impact on the health of your planet and its inhabitants. This at the time that that we have shortages of poultry, beef, and pork, and we've got stores that are literally having empty shelves. While 20 of our workers in these meat packing plants have died, 6,500 have fallen ill. It's spreading from meat packing plant to meat packing plant. Governor Kim Reynolds in Iowa is telling meat packing plant employees that if they don't return to work, and if they stay out because they don't want to get sick, they don't want to die, that she's going to be the one who is going to cut off their unemployment benefits. And meanwhile, the fake meat, Beyond Meat and Impossible, Beyond Meat saw their shares jump 49% last month. People are moving from meat to plant-based meat alternatives, and if you really miss burgers, try an Impossible Burger. Whopper is open for window delivery or carryout, or Burger King rather, and the Impossible Whopper is actually pretty amazing. It really tastes like meat. I mean, so much so that I was like, wait a minute, is this real? Anyhow, Doug in Columbus, Ohio. Hey, Doug, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Well, I'm kind of a Bernie guy, but I think we need to reopen and go with the Swedish approach, which the World Health Organization praises now. And I wanted to
the World Health Organization is not specifically praising the Swedish approach. The Swedes have 3 times the death rate of their other Nordic neighbors, but Sweden is moving toward herd immunity. That's their goal, but they're doing it very differently than we're doing it here, Doug. In Sweden, you have from the beginning, people have been wearing masks. They've been social distancing. A lot of the businesses where you might have a lot of people showing up, like bars, are still closed. They have, and this is all voluntary because it's a small country where everybody. I mean, this is why they have a national healthcare system. Everybody's looking out for everybody. Everybody gets it that we're all in this together. Doug, we can't do what Sweden did in the United States.
Schools and restaurants are open. The schools and restaurants are open. They've been open.
The high schools are not open. The colleges are not open. And restaurants are very, very limited. Doug, you're just not going to be able to do that here without massive numbers of deaths. And Sweden is starting to get significant pushback from their citizens as they're watching their elderly die. And they now have some major infections in some of their, their equivalent of what we would call nursing homes. Thom Friedman wrote a long piece about this 2 days ago in the New York Times. The so-called Swedish example that is being touted all over Fox News and on right-wing media is not, in my opinion, is not something that's going to work here in the United States because we don't have that level of cooperation. You can just walk down the street and 1 out of 3 people are refusing to social distance in the United States because there are these fools and asses who are listening to Fox News and right-wing hate radio, and they think it's a hoax. No one in Sweden thinks it's a hoax. they're working very hard to slow the transmission of this virus in Sweden. We are not, at least in the red
You're
states.
listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And don't bother saying, hey, I'm a Bernie supporter before you spout some right-wing crap at me. We'll be right back.
Guns for Hire, how the CIA and U.S. Army recruit mercenaries for white Rhodesia. It's a historical reprint of what appears to be a 1979 pamphlet, basically. This is from the introduction. It does have an ISBN number. It is available in book sources. In Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, actually this must have been published post-1980 because they're referencing Zimbabwe. In Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, 270,000 white settlers, mostly immigrated since World War II, controlled the government and economy, ruling over the 7 million black Africans. The Zimbabweans cannot vote. They have been forced off the bulk of the arable land, and they have no democratic rights whatsoever. All labor performance in Zimbabwe is black labor, and it is intensely exploited, often at less than subsistence wages. Zimbabweans have been fighting European invaders since the early 17th century. Since the 1890s, they have been directly ruled by Europeans, at first in the form of a private British corporation, the British South Africa Company. Since 1923, direct political rule has been in the hands of the white settlers, currently led by Ian Smith and his fascist Rhodesian Front Party. It's important to note that the white settlers were originally given this direct local power as a, quote, self-governing colony of the British government, thereby creating a master-caretaker relationship. During these past 80-odd years, Western imperialism, the multinational corporations of the United States, Britain, and South Africa, has extracted huge profits from the exploited and oppressed Zimbabwean population via the subsidiaries of the Anglo-Americans, Lonrho, AMAX, Union Carbide, Mobil, ITT, and other corporations. They fully intend to continue doing so as long as they can. The white settler minority has been rewarded for their violent subjugation of the Zimbabwean people with perhaps the highest national standard of living in the world. Sir Roy Walensky, the former Prime Minister of the Central African Federation, which included what is now Rhodesia, once said, "This man Smith has an appeal. It's the appeal of an easy life. For $6,000 a year, you can have 5 servants, a swimming pool, and a lot." Beginning during the early 1960s, however, the Zimbabwean nationalist forces, under the leadership of the Zimbabwe African National Union, ZANU, evolved the strategy of guerrilla war to liberate their people and land. It is proving to be very successful. There are 20,000 guerrillas in base camps in Tanzania and Mozambique, over 3,000 in Zimbabwe itself, and this number is continually rising. In a meeting between Stephen Solars, a U.S. congressman, and the ZANU guerrilla leaders, they were reported to reject the possibility of enlisting the assistance of Cuban or other foreign troops, declaring that if we cannot liberate ourselves, we do not deserve to be liberated. Despite Western propaganda to the effect that the U.S. and British only wish to avoid a bloodshed in Rhodesia, don't forget the Zimbabweans have been bleeding for almost a century, their real fear is that the liberation struggle will win. With this victory in sight, it is not surprising that the counterattack by the Smith regime has become more vicious and brutal. Actually, this must have been published pre-1980 because this is when Smith was still in power in Rhodesia. More than 250,000 rural Zimbabweans have been forced into concentration camps. Terrorist raids have been conducted against Zimbabwean refugees in Mozambique. Dusk to dawn shoot-on-sight curfews have been instituted and enforced in the border areas. And escalating counterinsurgency attacks have been launched against the military arm of the liberation struggle, the Zimbabwean People's Army, ZIPA. It is crucial for Westerners to understand that the Smith regime has not stood alone in this barbaric campaign. This pamphlet documents the critically important element in U.S. imperialism's support for the Smith regime, white mercenary reinforcements for the fascist Rhodesian, quote, security forces. This flow of U.S. mercenaries to prop up white Rhodesia is an important, though secret part, of U.S. imperialism's strategy for Africa. The U.S. has massive investments in southern Africa. Zimbabwe alone supplies the bulk of high-grade chrome ore used in the U.S. for jet engines and other advanced technological items. Coal, copper, and other minerals are ripped out of Zimbabwe for U.S. industry. Mobil Oil, Texaco, Hertz Rent-A-Cars, Holiday Inns, and many other U.S. corporations operate illegally in Rhodesia through foreign subsidiaries. More important still is South Africa, the fortress of U.S. interests in Africa, where $1.5 billion is invested by GM, IBM, Ford, and other giant multinational corporations. The liberation of Zimbabwe would, for the first time, penetrate the buffer zone of satellite countries protecting the borders of South Africa. South African guerrilla fighters, who are already training by the thousands at camps in Tanzania and Zambia, would have direct access to re-enter their land and accelerate the liberation struggle. Knowing that the stakes are high, U.S. imperialism has worked to strengthen the white supremacist outposts in Africa, although at times this had to be done covertly. In 1970, the Nixon White House approved Henry Kissinger's Operation Tar Baby strategy, based on Option 2 of the Secret National Security Study Memorandum Number 39. The strategy essentially called for covert military assistance, including direct exchanges, so that South African troops could be trained in the U.S. in specialized tactics and weapons. This would be done while the U.S. tried to convince Africans that it was on their side. This is from the pamphlet number 39, that Kissinger memorandum. We would maintain public opposition to racial oppression, but relax political isolation and economic restrictions without openly taking a position undermining the United Kingdom and the UN on Rhodesia. We would be more flexible in our attitudes toward the Smith regime. And it goes on from there. Guns for hire.
Coming up on the Science Revolution, as the Georgia governor rolled out a new death panel coronavirus plan, Dr. Andrew Glickson is here on the coronavirus versus climate extinction. While we're dealing with COVID-19, we're also hurtling toward extinction. Dr. Justin Frank drops by saying Trump could see dead bodies from coronavirus and just step over them. What? Also, Greg Palast explains the secret history of the Deepwater Horizon, BP's second blowout. It's the 10-year anniversary for Deepwater Horizon's debacle. Find the Science Revolution wherever fine podcasts are available. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Nancy in Arlington Heights, Illinois. Hey, Nancy, what's up?
Hey, Tom, love you, love your show. We just found out last Thursday that our niece has been diagnosed with COVID-19. She just received her Bachelor of Nursing in December, and she's been working at a psychiatric hospital, and it gets worse. It took her 3 days to get tested. Now she's stuck at home with her 4 children, and her doctor told her to just assume they all have it, which is horrendous. So we're so worried about her. But all these people, Trump and all these horrible, horrible people who work for him, remind me of something that my grandfather used to say, my Swedish grandfather. He'd say, there are more horses' asses in the world than horses.
Apparently. Nancy, thanks for the report, and give our best wishes to your. Do you say niece?
Yes, my niece.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tom. God bless you.
This is a tough one. Thank you, Nancy. Good talking to you. Kimon in Dayton, Ohio. Hey, Kimon, what's up? Zimbabwe?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I've been trying to get in for about 3 weeks since you made that statement that when Mugabe took back the farmland and gave it to indigenous Zimbabweans, that these people didn't know how to farm, so that there was a food shortage. And that is absolutely not what happened. First of all.
Okay, so what did happen? I mean, there was a food shortage, and then the economy collapsed. What caused it?
Yes, there was. There was a food shortage because there was a drought the following year. That had nothing to do with those people who knew, who were given the land, knowing how to farm. And then the U.S. and Britain promptly put sanctions on the country, which they're still there, and they were unable to import fertilizers and other things that they needed to farm. And let me just give you a quick analogy of that. That is quite similar to what happened with black farmers in this country. As long as my parents grew up as sharecroppers, and as long as they were sharecroppers, there was no problem getting seeds and the loans and those kind of things that it took them to farm successfully. But they had to give the profits primarily to the landowners. When those same farmers became landowners, then the government began to attack them by not giving them loans that they gave to other white farmers, and doing things of that nature. That is exactly what happened in Zimbabwe. And the fact that this is going, that in South Africa now, they have decided that they are going to do the same thing. And the country is revving up to attack South Africa when they are returning the land. When I was there recently in South Africa, even though elections are supposedly free and fair, 90% of the land was still owned by 5% of the people. That is absurd. And those 5% who own the land are whites. That is exactly what was happening in Zimbabwe, and that's what was trying to be corrected. And it would have been corrected easily had not Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan pulled out of deals that they were supposed to pay these white farmers whose land was to be confiscated. They refused to do it. And when they refused to do it, then there was nothing else to do but take the land back without compensation.
Right, which they didn't do in South Africa, but they did do in Zimbabwe, right?
They did do in in Zimbabwe, and
right.
What I'm saying is South Africa right now is the government is
moving in that direction.
contemplating giving the land back to the indigenous people, some of it.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Shimon,
So what is the U.S.
Thank you
say?
for correcting me. Thank you for educating me. I did not know that, and I guess I was listening to some white racist propaganda, but I was getting that through what you would call mainstream news channels back in the day. And thank you. I didn't know that.
And thank you.
So. You're welcome. I appreciate the call. Thank you. Merrick in West Hills, California. Hey, Merrick, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I sure appreciate your program, and I've been trying to get to you for weeks because ever since this pandemic started, I've been following a public health whistleblower for about 20 years. He wrote a book called Death in the Air. It was called Globalism, Terrorism, and Toxic Warfare. And he, on his website, revolutiontelevision.net, stated that in late October, they had a mock tabletop pandemic at Johns Hopkins University. I don't know if you know about that.
Yeah, they did. This was in the New York Times. Yeah.
Okay, because
and also late last year they did this. The U.S. military did this. They did a mock pandemic.
Yeah, they did too. But the thing is, if you watch the video on coronavirus predictive programming, they had that program called Predict. That was put out by USAID that Trump stopped in September, that was supposed to predict the kind of viruses that were coming down the pipeline. So they knew it was coming, and they had this mock pandemic. But in that video on coronavirus predictive programming, he shows that the Japanese lab looked at the gene sequence in the virus, and they found that there was an HIV protein that was put at the end of the virus. So, so you look at what's going on.
You have wandered into conspiracy theory territory, and I'm not going to follow you there. The U.S. government has screwed up hugely. And we had all these, let's look for these kinds of dangers programs that were put into place during the Clinton administration, during the Bush administration, and in particular during the Obama administration, when, back to Bush with SARS, and with Obama was H1N1, the flu. And those programs were shut down by Donald Trump. He closed the Office of Pandemics basically in the National Security Office inside the White House, and in the Homeland Security division. He just shut them down, laid off everybody, or fired everybody. Said, we're not going to do that anymore. And so, of course, we were utterly unprepared, because we've got an idiot as a president right now. But when you wander off into these things, I'm just not going to go there. Julian in Clatskanie, Oregon, or Clatskanie.
Thank you, Tom. Clatskanie, Oregon is the term.
Okay.
I wanted to point out that the state motto of Kentucky, Mitch McConnell let all the states bankrupt themselves. The state motto is united we stand, divided we fall. And this is, if we don't go by what they say, but what they do, this is definitely intentional. They're intentionally trying to kill off Americans that they consider lesser. And,
well, that's my point, Julian. About half of our deaths nationwide appear to be elderly people, and in particular people in nursing homes. In some states, the nursing home deaths, constitute more than half or 2/3 of all the deaths. And I believe that's the case here in Oregon as well. They figure, hey, we don't have to pay for, Social Security and long-term Medicaid for these people anymore. And then, the secondary population is getting hit really, really hard are black people. And, particularly in Georgia right now, and in Louisiana. And, I think the guys running the Trump administration and the white racists in the Republican Party are looking at that going, hey, that's cool. That's cool. As long as it's not killing a lot of, middle-aged white people or young white people, we're good with this. I really think they're thinking like that, Julian.
Yeah, and it's frustrating to see that Americans are, just because they're not wearing swastikas on their arms doesn't mean that they're not promoting an ideology that is detrimental to society.
Yeah, well, some of the guys in Michigan yesterday were wearing swastikas.
Oh, man.
The
ones that raided the house there.
Yeah. They broke and frankly, I think they should have been disarmed and arrested. It's
if they were black people, imagine if it was Black Panthers doing that.
This is the ultimate statement of white privilege, that they can scream at a cop from 3 inches with a gun in their hand, and the cop isn't going to do anything. You try having a Hispanic person or a black person do that. They will be dead in seconds. You're absolutely right, Julian, and that's why I said, this is the ultimate expression of white privilege. What this disgusting display of arrogance and stupidity we saw yesterday in Michigan.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's 45 minutes past the hour. It's Anything Goes Friday. Whatever you want to talk about, we'll pick up your calls, and we'll be right back. And welcome back. Camille, hang on just a second here. There we go. Camille in San Clemente, California, listening to KPFK. Hey, Camille, what's up?
Good morning, Tom. Love your show. I'm listening to a lot of David Icke mentioned Sabbatean Frankism as controlling the 1%. They're not even a living entity, but they have an ability to control the planet through holograms and simulations.
Wait a minute, what did I miss? Who's not a living entity that is controlling the planet?
The Sabbatean Frankism.
What's that? Who's that?
That's what I want to know, if you know anything about them.
I've never heard anything like this. It sounds like one of these conspiracy theories that they make up to see how many people will buy into it.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's part of the other side that I'm looking at, and
are they also saying that pigeons are robotic spies sent here from the planet Xenu?
Maybe. Who knows?
I'm okay with that. But this sounds pretty strange.
Yeah. Well, I heard it on a couple different people have been talking about the Sabbatean freakism. So I just kind of want a heads up.
Yeah. I have a feeling they're pulling your leg, Camille. And if they're not, that would be very troubling. Thanks for the call. Tori in Poway, California. Hey, Tori, what's up? Thanks for watching us on YouTube.
Hey, good morning. I'm a suburban privileged guiltist right about now. My entire life, I've been making calls, voting, emails, and I'm seeing that all my effort and all my work is going nowhere. It's falling on deaf ears because I feel like corporatism has bought pretty much the majority of our entire DC leadership. And so I'm a Bernie follower. It was always not me, us. And right now, us has no direction. And I would like for someone to start an organization, #WeTheDonors. And every Tuesday, because Tuesday is the day we usually vote, they have like a targeted hit list of who to donate to. So we reward AOC for voting no on a bill that had no relief for the people. We vote or we donate money to the challenger of Mitch McConnell because he wants to open up the Senate for judges, but not to give relief to the people. The policies that you have these amazing progressive House representatives presenting, they have no power. And I see it over and over again. Nancy Pelosi does not listen to them because she thinks we, the people, and us are not with them, but we are. So if we donate when the Worker Bill of Rights comes out and you see who signs it, donate to their campaign. Tell them with our dollars. You get the unions of the nurses, the teachers. I'm home right now teaching my kids Lord of the Flies. And I'm seeing our nation pretty much becoming a society of where we can decide how we want to live. Are we going to be savages or are we going to be good? Are we going to help the people? Are we, I mean, they're sophomores in high school and they're living through this, learning some of this. And we need to weaponize who we are and take back.
Tori, you should start a super PAC.
I don't know how to do that.
Well, I don't frankly know how to do it either. I've never done it, but I'm sure you can find instructions online. But let's become a nexus. I'm all in favor of what you're talking about. Tori, thank you for the call, and thanks for watching us there on YouTube. We'll be right back. Did you know that Ronald Reagan committed treason to become president in 1980 and George Herbert Walker Bush was in on it and he avoided being prosecuted for this in 1992 with a little help from Bill Barr? It's on page 116 of my book, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America. So every week we do a special video for supporters of our program. It's available over at thomhartmann.com. And, it's a private video. And this week, I'm talking about the relationship between Donald Trump and Fox News. Trump's recent liberate these states with Democratic governors tweets, which seem to be actually calling for like armed revolt or asking, his crazy followers to let's send some pipe bombs or something like one already has to Democrats. He did that 2 minutes after watching a Fox News segment basically saying the same thing. Fox News is programming the brain of the president, and their programming was, basically developed by Roger Ailes to infuriate people. This outrage as a way of holding people so that they can sell advertising. And it's doing harm to our republic. You can check the whole thing out, the whole new video over at thomhartmann.com. Okay, welcome back. It's Anything Goes Friday. And Joan in Arlington. What's up, Joan?
Well, I was just wondering if the meat supply is safe at the supermarket, How do you sterilize a bologna sandwich,
but bologna's been pre-cooked, but, I guess the way that you sterilize meat if you're buying it at the store is you cook it, because it's going to have, it's not.
It's not. But, I mean, you know, 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 it's not. But But you got
it's not
all
only
the
carrying,
preparation
possibly
and got
carrying
all
the coronavirus pathogen, it's also carrying things like E. coli and listeria and all kinds of, I mean, there's all kinds of pathogens in our meat supply. It's why you have to handle it very, very carefully and cook it very carefully. To you, John.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people like stuff raw and all that big E-man stuff. So, yeah, I think it's a source. I think just preparing it and getting it on your hands and on your table and you know, splashing the blood on the walls that you're gonna be passing stuff around. That's all.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
It's a tough one. It's a tough one, and you know, the easy answer is Beyond Burgers and Impossible Foods. You know, these meat substitutes. If you must have the meat flavor. Jackie in Sierra Vista. Hey, Jackie, what's up?
Well, hi, Tom. I'd like to follow up on the previous caller. Is there any research indicating that the coronavirus is transmittable from sick people working in the meat processing plants to the raw meat to people?
I don't know of any, Jackie, and I don't know of any research I mean, you know, they have researched. In fact, the guy, you know, there was a guy reporting on it at one of Trump's campaign rallies that he holds every night on TV about 2 weeks ago. Or maybe, it was a week ago. He was the guy, it set up Trump's whole thing about, you know, let's shoot up Lysol. And, you know, he was saying we've done research on how long this virus lasts on plastic and how long it lasts on metal and how long it lasts on paper. But to the best of my knowledge, nobody has done an examination of how long it lasts on meat and whether the virus could infect a dead animal's carcass rather than a living animal. And whether, you know, in meat, obviously, you know, at least red meat is going to, you know, mammal meat, shall we say. I don't know if this is true for fish, but, you know, certainly they've got angiotensin receptors. All, you know, animals have blood pressure too. And the angiotensin receptors are the places where this virus locks into a cell. Whether it can do that with a dead cell or not, I don't have a clue, Jackie, and I know of no research that indicates that. I'd love to see some, and I think it's a great question. I just don't know the answer. I'm sorry. Orion in Seattle. Hey, Orion, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Hi. I want to tell you about Project Drawdown on drawdown.org, the comprehensive plan for reversing global warming. And this project is very important for two reasons. You can go on their website and read about 100 different interesting solutions to global warming. Some of them...
Yeah, this is based on the book, Drawdown,
by...
he lives in California. I know him, I've met him, and I can't remember his name. Do you recall who the author?
Oh, I don't remember his name. I'm unaffiliated. I love this stuff. And so there are two things. One is each of these different solutions is potentially an interest group, which needs to be able to argue with each other and negotiate with each other when we get the Republicans out of the way and we start addressing this. The other thing is Project Drawdown can help us answer the question, can we make it or not? What's it going to cost? And they don't have the figure on their website, but they said $30 trillion. And we also got to consider what amount of seed money would have to magically appear to make the $30 trillion happen. And also,
I got it. It's a great site, Orion. Let me endorse it. Let me co-endorse it with you, Donna. And thank you, Donna in Stedman, North Carolina. Hey, Donna. It says here you disagree with me. What?
I totally disagree, but what I would like to say is I am a 72-year-old widow. I live on a small Social Security check out in the country. But even though the United States of America is wonderful, and you should never disrespect the president of the United States the way you badmouth him.
The president of the United States tells 5, 6, 7 lies on average every single day. He is disrespecting his office. He is, you know, in my opinion, regularly committing crimes, and I'll say it again, he's also stupid. And he's hurting our country, and he's responsible for the death of 60,000 people. And Donna, he wants to take away your Social Security. Donald Trump has proposed turning your Social Security over to Citibank. Donna, where'd Donna go?
That's the way it is. But you know what? I'm a Christian woman, and I'm going to pray for you and for Stephanie, because y'all will have to answer for all the bad things that you have said, not just about Donald Trump, but about other people too. America is a beautiful world to live in. But you people make it sound like this is a horrible place to be. I would never.
Oh, I love America, and I think I live in a wonderful place. And, you know, Donna, thank you for your prayers. I genuinely appreciate that. I'll take all the prayers I can get. And, you know, and let's all continue to pray for Donald Trump and, you know, that he might wake up from his wandering ways. But, you know, Donald Trump, Donna, you need to know, wants to take away your Social Security and your Medicare. He wants to end them. He has already tried.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
We have a new video over at ThomHartmann.com for the people who support our program, and it's an interesting one. The phrase, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, has a really interesting history, and the exploitation of that phrase and that history by right-wingers in 20th century America, or late 20th century America, now 21st century America, also has a fascinating and rather grim history. Just the general absurdity of the idea that somebody can lift themselves off the ground by reaching down and pulling on a strap on their boots. I mean, just think about it for a second. But it's used, this is used as justification by right-wingers, you know, particularly over the last 40 years since the Reagan Revolution, to say, oh, you know, poor people, it's all, their poverty is their own fault. Check it out. It's over at ThomHartmann.com. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment by yours truly. This is from Chapter 1, The Unholy Alliance of Racism, Genocide, and Guns. In Isaiah 14:21, the Lord tells Isaiah, prepare for his sons a place of slaughter because of the iniquity of their fathers. It's a variation on the old story of karma and seems in a very real way to be playing out today in the United States. America is facing an epidemic. Public health officials use that word of gun-related suicides, accidents, and even homicides and police killings. That epidemic has grown worse in the past decade, largely because the number of guns in America has increased, in large part because of the racial fears of white men who have bought guns in record numbers for 8 years during the time in office of America's first black president. A landmark 1999 study from researchers Franklin Zimmering and Gordon Hawkins showed that the main correlation, far surpassing mental illness, socioeconomic status, or race, that could be defined as causal in predicting the rates of gun deaths is a simple number, the number of guns distributed among society. In the 30 years since that study, Zimmering and Hawkins' results have been replicated and reanalyzed dozens of times. As the American Academy of Pediatrics said in a release published in AAAS's Science magazine, quote, new research shows dramatic differences in the number of children hospitalized and killed each year in the U.S. from firearm-related injuries based on their state's gun legislation, even after adjusting for poverty, unemployment, and education rates. It found twice as many pediatric firearm deaths in states with the most lenient gun regulations compared to states where gun laws are strictest, end quote. They added that this is a critical issue for children, quoting Stephanie Cho, MD, the lead author of the abstract, quote, firearm-related injuries are the second leading cause of death among children in the United States. But we found a clear discrepancy in where those deaths happen.
that corresponds with the strengths of states' firearm legislation. In states with lenient laws, children die at alarmingly greater rates, end quote. And unsurprisingly, America not only has unusually lenient gun laws, but also has more guns in civilian hands than any other country in the world. America has a bit more than 4% of the world's population, but holds almost 50% of all the guns in civilian hands worldwide, more than 390 million guns. And the more guns a society has, the more gun deaths it will experience. The NRA and their army of lobbyists have been quite successful in making this happen. During Obama's presidency, there was a steady and hysterical drumbeat of articles, emails, and political proclamations by so-called pro-gun politicians and think tanks, suggesting that Obama was preparing to take away everyone's guns at any minute. There was even a subtext embraced by the hard right that he wasn't going to stop there. After disarming white Americans, these folks said, Obama was going to intern them in otherwise unused FEMA camps. Flipped-out gun owners were repeatedly arrested during the Obama years trying to break into retired or temporarily vacant military facilities and toxic waste sites, looking for evidence to prove that Obama was, in fact, preparing the modern-day version of the World War II-era Japanese internment camps. White supremacy was the founding notion of this nation. White Europeans thought themselves so superior to the human beings they met here in 1492 that Columbus himself became the first North American slaver, shipping Taino Indians back to Spain as slaves to the royal family. A slave is as good as gold, Columbus wrote for the king and queen. Europeans in the Americas then stepped up that game into a hemisphere-wide campaign of racial genocide, pulling off the largest multi-generational mass murder in the history of the world. In the midst of that effort, they also created the legal mechanisms necessary to define and legally regulate slavery, and even built those systems into America's founding document, the Constitution. America was birthed in slavery and genocide, and both needed guns. It was the superior weaponry of guns that gave the European settlers a massive advantage over the bow and arrow-equipped Native Americans, and it was the raw power of widespread white ownership of guns in the South that propped up the institution of slavery for hundreds of years. Without guns, neither would have been possible, or at least neither would have been as easy as they were to pull off. And now, after centuries of guns being used to kill off and keep down people of color in America, those same guns are creating a terrifying epidemic of gun-facilitated violence, from public schools to private homes and public concerts. It's enough to make one think that Isaiah was onto something. Chapter 2, The Sanitized History of America. The United States' expansion and conquest in the late 18th century through the 19th century and into the 20th century is a history written by white men, inked in the blood of Native Americans, and built on the broken and bloody backs of enslaved people brought here from Africa. From 1791, when the Bill of Rights went into effect, until the end of the Civil War, the Second Amendment protected the rights only of white men to own guns. This is simply because until the ratification of the 14th Amendment, states determined who was recognized as a person protected under the Constitution. Initially, in most states, that meant that white men who owned land and paid taxes were the only people considered full citizens under the Constitution. In the South, white men with guns formed slave patrols to control slaves and formed posses to hunt escaped slaves. The book, The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Hey, cleaner air in Europe. The Europeans have actually looked at this. Now, European scientists, as a result of this pandemic causing these shutdowns, most of Europe is shut down, and the consequence of that is measurable. And it's surprising how, there's been a 40% drop in nitrogen dioxide, excuse me. And, one of the byproducts of burning fossil fuels, a 40% drop in that, and a 10% drop in particulate pollution. That's the little tiny particles that come out of tailpipes and come out of factories, out of where they burn coal and oil and things. Even natural gas produces some particulate pollution, although it's very, very little compared to other forms of fossil fuels, particularly coal. But, a 10% drop in that has resulted in at least 11,000 people across Europe not dying who would have otherwise died. And this is just over the last couple of months as a consequence of this kind of pollution. This is pretty amazing. The types of pollution they note that weaken the immune system. This is, by the way, from EcoWatch.com, a piece by Jordan Davison. The headline, "Cleaner Air in Europe has resulted in 11,000 fewer deaths, new study finds." And these kinds of pollution, nitrogen dioxide and particulate matter, are responsible for 470,000 deaths a year in Europe. And what they're finding is that there has been, and I quote from the study, unprecedentedly dramatic reductions in coal and oil burning associated with air pollution in Europe. This is the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air, CREA. And it's remarkable. I mean, unprecedented reductions. When they looked at air quality, they looked at weather conditions, they looked at emissions, they looked at population, and they looked at disease prevalence. And what they found was that Germany ranks first with an estimated 2,083 deaths avoided over the last month as a result of this reduction in poisons that are being pumped into the air to enhance profits of big corporations. 2,000 fewer deaths in Germany, 1,752 fewer deaths in the UK, 1,490 fewer deaths than you would expect this time of year in Italy, 1,230 fewer deaths in France, 1,083 fewer deaths in Spain. And the kinds of conditions that they're looking at, they're saying things related to heart conditions. That was a 40% reduction in heart disease, a 17% reduction in lung disease. This is what we're actually seeing right now as a result of just 6-8 weeks of clean air. A 17% reduction in lung disease across Europe, a 13% reduction in strokes and cancer. I mean, this is just remarkable stuff. And Dr. L.J. Smith, a consultant in respiratory medicine at King's College Hospital in London, told The Guardian, "There's no doubt that a fall in air pollution is a part of the reason why they're seeing these fewer deaths. It's allowed us to question what we have previously accepted as normal," he says. "If air pollution returns to its previous levels, my waiting room will once again start filling up with children and adults struggling to breathe." Pretty remarkable stuff. Anyhow, it's Anything Goes Friday. Well, I got to stop saying anyhow so much. It's Anything Goes Friday. So let's pick up some of your phone calls here. Marvin in New York City. Hey, Marvin, what's up?
Hey, how you doing, Tom? Yeah, how's everything? How's you and the family? Everybody okay?
Yeah, everything so far. Knock wood, Marvin. How about you?
Yeah, everybody's fine. God bless. God bless. Yeah, I was just want to make a comment on people in Michigan walking around with guns and being able to go up into government buildings, state buildings with weapons. I remember a time when the Black Panthers tried to exercise their Second Amendment rights. When J. Edgar Hoover and the police departments around the country hurry up and crush that time. I listened to your comments off the phone. Thank you for your time, sir. Yeah. Enjoy your weekend.
Thank you, Marvin. Yeah, they killed Fred Hampton. They killed a whole bunch of people, and it was when Huey Newton and Bobby Seale decided that they were going to walk up to the California State House in Sacramento with guns in hand, and Reagan was out there with a group of children that he was doing something for. And he freaked out. And within 2 weeks, they had the, what was it called, the Mumford Bill? It starts with an M anyway. They had this legislation within 2 weeks that banned open carry in California. Up to that point, they had open carry. But, oh my God, a half a dozen scary black people with guns. That was the end of that. So yeah, I think that if it had been 400 or 700, the estimates are between 400 and 700. Between 400 and 700, black guys with guns, wearing Black Panther symbols and things, who had showed up at the Michigan State House, there would have been a very different result or reaction from the police. I think that we can all, basically predict that. Michael in Hickory Hills, Illinois. Hey, Michael, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Just a quick question on asking your perspective, if you have any insight on, like, the small modular reactors that are being developed by Department of Energy and a few independent engineering companies. Do you see them as being
You're talking these so-called pebble reactors?
I don't know if they're Pebble, but I know the main company is based out of Portland, Oregon, out there.
Mm-hmm.
But they're still, I think they still use the standard uranium nuclear fuel, but nowhere near the scale of an existing, power plant, nor the output either. But do you see these
I still
as being
think it's
viable?
a terrible idea. You're basically raping the land, to mine the uranium. Uranium is not found in, huge solid deposits, so you have to get massive amounts of uranium ore, and then you have to go through a very, very energy-intensive extraction process to extract the uranium out of that, and then you have to purify that uranium. All these things take an enormous amount of fossil fuel, and the land is typically left, as unusable. It's all radioactive, and it's the tailings, the debris, and it's spread all over the place. And they do a lot of this on or near Indian land and on public lands. So anything that is using the products of uranium mining is, by definition, has a huge carbon budget to start out with because of all the fossil fuels involved in that. And then how you dispose of the waste. There's still no disposal for the waste.
There's a lot of energy resources used, like you say, to capture the material and process it. But I just think down the road, with air pollution, climate change, things that you've mentioned, global warming, I don't know that it's the absolute solution, but I would think it would contribute to helping things be reduced. But it has a negative consequence, exactly what you're saying.
If it was carbon neutral, I would agree with you, Michael, but it's not. I mean, Helen Caldicott on this program pointed out that it takes the first, as I recall, it was like the first 15 years of operation of a nuclear power plant before you produce 1 kilowatt of power that is not associated with fossil fuels. It takes 15 years for a power plant to basically pay back that carbon budget that went into all the concrete that's there, that went into all the steel that's there, that goes into the mining of the uranium, the refining of the uranium, the transportation of the uranium, and that doesn't even begin to address the cost or the timeline for storing the waste. So I just don't see any possibility that these things are viable. I know that some people on in the climate change movement are in favor of nuclear power. James Hansen, I believe, is one of them. The original guy who turned us on to all this stuff. But I think they're wrong, personally, and I would not support those kind of programs. Michael, thank you for the call. Thank you for a thoughtful call too, disagreeing with me. We'll be back. It's 15 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. It's Anything Goes Friday. Whatever you'd like to talk about, it's fine with me. And, oh, by the way, the Pentagon released the UFO videos. I'll tell you about that after the break.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Stick around. We'll be right back. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, your media support group for We the People. And welcome back. Katie in Commerce City, Colorado. Hey, Katie, what's on your mind today?
I just have a quick question, and it's about how could Trump be held accountable for the crimes committed before office, during office, and after office? Would there be a way to get a non-biased jury, or would a military tribunal be more likely for him to go and be held accountable? And why haven't presidents been held accountable for their illegal behaviors?
By and large, starting with Nixon, the position of our presidents, well, starting with Jerry Ford, I guess would be the way to say it, has been, we're going to forgive and we're going to forget, we're going to put it behind us, and we're going to move forward. So Nixon created crimes, he was accepting bribes, he was doing all kinds of stuff that was worthy of impeachment, way beyond Watergate. And Jerry Ford said, we're just going to pardon him for all this stuff and, cut him a pass. Then Ronald Reagan came along, committed treason to get into office. The president of Iran, Abdullah Bani Sadr, in the Christian Science Monitor pointed out in an interview there that, he was the president of Iran when Reagan was sworn into office, and that they had cut a deal, the government of Iran had cut a deal with Reagan to hold the hostages until after the election in order to prevent Jimmy Carter from getting reelected, and put Reagan in the White House. And in exchange for that, Reagan was going to sell them weapons, which he did for the next several years until he got busted for it. That was the Iran part of Iran-Contra. So, Reagan committed those crimes. In 1992, Lawrence Walsh, the prosecutor, was about to prosecute George Herbert Walker Bush. Reagan was kind of out of his reach at that point because he was into full-blown dementia and could not have even shown up at a trial. But they were going to go after George W. Bush, and he had subpoenaed some of Bush's records. And so Bush turned to his attorney general, Bill Barr, yes, the same guy. Yeah. He was Bush's attorney general in 92. And this is the Christmas Eve massacre. This was December 24th, 1992. Go look at the New York Times front page for that day. It's mind-boggling. Right. Basically this massive cover-up of Iran-Contra. So we covered that up. Bill Clinton came into office and said, I'm going to look forward, not to the past, which I think was a huge mistake. I don't see any specific crimes that Bill Clinton committed, but then George W. Bush comes into office, and he and Dick Cheney lied us into 2 wars. And aggressively, intentionally lied us into 2 wars, and got rich and fat off the federal dole. Halliburton was, because Dick Cheney had bought Dresser Industries, which had a huge asbestos liability. Halliburton was on the verge of bankruptcy when Dick Cheney became vice president, and suddenly Halliburton is getting tens of billions of dollars in no-bid contracts. Some of them they didn't even have to ask for. Here, Halliburton, we'd like to give you some money. And Dick Cheney is worth, probably hundreds of millions of dollars now as a result of his Halliburton stock. And again, Barack Obama came into office, and not to mention the torture facilities and the black sites and the CIA and all this stuff, and Gina Haspel destroying the tapes of the tortures, and she's now the director of the CIA again. I mean, it's because Barack Obama said, we're not going to look into those crimes. And now you've got Donald Trump committing crimes. And odds are, if Joe Biden becomes the next president, he's going to say, I'm not going to, go back. I don't know why Democratic presidents are unwilling to prosecute Republican criminals. I don't, honest to God, don't know why, Katie. I think they think that it's more important, to let the country heal and come together or something like that. But, we've had literally crimes committed by Republicans in the White House going back to the 60s, back to the 70s, well, the late 60s, 68. And it's got to end.
Our 1-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program.
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. David in Woodland Hills. David, you've got our more or less monthly astrology update, and you've got something about Trump.
I would like to tell you what the astrologers have to say about Trump and where humanity is and where humanity is headed.
Okay.
We have entered the age of Aquarius. These ages are 2,160 years long, so we will peak in 1,000 years. Aquarius is the sign of the Enlightenment, the humanitarian, peace on earth. John Lennon's Imagine, no countries, no religion, the people sharing everything. That's Aquarius. Aquarius is also the time when we will peak into our brain power. So in 1,000 years, it may be possible for us to communicate telepathically. It may be possible to astral travel. We'll know when we get there. That's the good news. We are headed for greatness. Unfortunately for us, we're here at the beginning, and the beginning always indicates extremely difficult times because all of the existing structures have to be torn asunder. Capitalism, religion, patriarchy, racism, it all has to go in order for the Enlightenment to take hold. And so many astrologers are coming to the conclusion, and this is disturbing on so many levels, that Donald Trump's soul is on the heroic path of being the great destroyer who ushers in the Enlightenment. We hate the raging forest fire that destroys everything in its path. We love the new growth. And finally, the genius of Aquarius, and a question for all of us. Aquarius recognizes that when we all become enlightened and on the same page, that can lead to a cult-like existence, and so it is imperative that the individual maintain their individuality within the collective, and that's why whenever I see people with tattoos and piercings all over their face, it's not my thing, but the importance of their right to be able to do that is my thing. And the question, if all of this is true, what do we do about it? We don't want to be part of the destruction. That's not who we are. Even if it leads to the Enlightenment, what do we do about it? I have my answer. I wonder what you think.
I generally don't so much run my life by astrology, so I don't know what to say, David.
Well, would you like to hear my answer?
Sure, go for it.
Well, we have to minimize the suffering as much as we can, and most of us are evolved enough to want to do that. And secondly, we have to be the voices in the wilderness, shouting out to the children and the grandchildren the same thing you say about American history. The highest peaks always follow the deepest valleys.
Yeah. Oh, good one. David, thank you. I appreciate your insights. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Sarah in Fort Worth, Texas. Hey, Sarah, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. Hey, listen, I wonder if history is going to remember this period of time as our trail of tears. I wanted to get your opinion on that.
Well, it looks like this coronavirus is starting to burn through Native American communities to start out with, which was the original Trail of Tears. This was what Andrew Jackson did to the Cherokee in Georgia.
Exactly.
And killed many of them. The analogy is imperfect, but I do think that Trump is going to go down in history as the guy that killed a couple 100,000 Americans through incompetence or bad science or fuzzy math or something. Buying into the whole herd immunity thing, and we're going to see the evidence of that as we go into the fall and winter. I think that we're going to have another explosion of these cases as all these states start opening up, and it's going to get very, very bad. I think go ahead.
Speaking from one of those states, yes, I understand.
Yeah, you're in Texas. Texas is opening up today. In fact, Alabama, as of today, retail stores can reopen at 50% capacity in Texas. You've got retail stores, restaurants, and movie theaters that can open today. Although barbershops and hair salons and bars are still going to be closed in Texas. So this is a gradual thing that they're doing, which is, I suppose, better than nothing. In Pennsylvania, Governor Tom Wolf is allowing some outdoor recreation, golf courses, marinas, things like that, construction projects. In Iowa, restaurants, retail malls, and fitness centers and racetracks are opening, but they have to be at 50% capacity. In Idaho, places of worship, daycare, youth activities, and camps will all be reopened. This is all happening today, this Friday, today. In Illinois, hospitals can resume non-life-threatening surgeries. Outdoor recreation can resume. Gardens and greenhouses and garden centers will be open, and retail will allow pickup and delivery. That seems reasonable. In India, we've never lost that here in Oregon and in Washington State. In Indiana, their stay-at-home order expires on April 30th. That was yesterday. And the Republican governor, Eric Holcomb, said that businesses should prepare to reopen, but he has yet to release any details. In Ohio, all medical procedures can be done without an overnight stay as of today, including dentists and veterinarians. And the malls and general office environments can reopen on May 4th. In North Dakota, Governor Doug Burgum says that North Dakota is going to reopen on Friday, but strict social distancing protocols. And they've got different guidelines for restaurants, gyms, and cosmetology stuff. And in Arizona, Doug Ducey, the Republican governor of Arizona, says his state's going to reopen today, but he has not yet said if there's any restrictions or limits on that. So that's where we're at, Sarah. It's an interesting experiment. Go ahead.
Yeah,
real quick.
I see the analogy. I do. But anyway, thank you so much for your response.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah.
Bye-bye.
Nice to hear from you. And I think that the really, really shameful element of this is going to be what Trump allowed this coronavirus to do to communities of color and Native American communities. We'll be back. It's coming up on 28 minutes past the hour. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, helping you win the water cooler wars.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And it's Anything Goes Friday. Whatever's on your mind, we can chat about it. We'll be back. It's hitting the bottom of the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Our book today is American Cipher, Bo Bergdahl and the U.S. Tragedy in Afghanistan by Farwell and Ames. I'm reading from Chapter 4, titled An Army of One. 2 years after the incident at Cape May, Bo's Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Defying Hitler by Sebastian Haffner, a memoir. This is from Chapter 17, about a little more than a third of the way into the book. At first, the revolution only gave the impression of being an historical event like any other, a matter for the press that might just possibly have some effect on the public mood. The Nazis celebrate January 30th as their day of revolution. They are wrong. There was no revolution on January 30th, 1933, just a change of government. Hitler became chancellor, by no means the Führer of the Nazi regime. The cabinet contained only 2 Nazis apart from him. He swore an oath of allegiance to the Weimar Constitution. The general opinion was that it was not the Nazis who had won, but the bourgeois parties of the right, who had captured, in quotes, the Nazis and held all the key positions in the government. In constitutional terms, events had taken a much more conventional, unrevolutionary course than most of what had happened during the previous 6 months. Outwardly also, the day had no revolutionary aspects, unless one considers a Nazi torchlight procession through Wilhelmstrasse or a minor gunfight in the suburbs that night as signs of a revolution. For most of us outsiders, the experience of January 30th, 1933 was that of reading the papers and the emotions we felt while we were doing so. The morning headline was, "Hitler called to president." That produced a certain nervous, impotent irritation. Hitler had been called to the president in August and November. He had been offered the vice-chancellorship and then the chancellorship. Both times he had set impossible conditions, and both times there had been solemn declarations. Never again. Each time, never again had lasted exactly 3 months. Hitler's opponents in Germany at that time suffered from a compulsive urge to offer him everything he wanted, indefatigably, and at an even cheaper price. Indeed, to press it upon him. It's the same now with his opponents outside Germany. Again and again, this appeasement was formally renounced, and again it gaily reappeared at the crucial moment. Just so today. Then, as now, one's only hope was Hitler's own unreasonableness. Would it not sooner or later exhaust the patience of his opponents? Then, as now, it became apparent that their patience knew no bounds. At midday, the headline said, "Hitler makes impossible demands." We nodded, half reassured. It was only too credible. It would have gone against his nature to ask for less than too much. Perhaps the cup had once more passed from us. Hitler, the last defense against Hitler. At about 5 o'clock, the evening papers arrived. Cabinet of National Unity formed Hitler Reichschancellor. I don't know what the general reaction was. For about a minute, mine was completely correct. Icy horror. Certainly this had been a possibility for a long time. You had to reckon with it. Nevertheless, it was so bizarre, so incredible to read it now in black and white. Hitler, Reichschancellor. For a moment, I physically sensed the man's odor of blood and filth, the nauseating approach of a man-eating animal, its foul, sharp claws in my face. Then I shook the sensation off, tried to smile, started to consider, and found many reasons for reassurance. That evening, I discussed the prospects of the new government with my father. We agreed it had a good chance of doing a lot of damage, but not much chance of surviving very long. A deeply reactionary government with Hitler as its mouthpiece. Apart from this, it did not really differ much from the two governments that had succeeded Bruning's. Even with the Nazis, it would not have a majority in the Reichstag. Of course, that could always be dissolved, but the government had a clear majority of the population against it, in particular the working class, which would probably go communist now that the Social Democrats had completely discredited themselves. One could prohibit the communists, but that would only make them more dangerous. In the meantime, the government would be likely to implement reactionary social and cultural measures with some anti-Semitic additions to please Hitler. That would not attract any of its opponents to its side. Foreign policy would probably be a matter of banging the table. There might be an attempt to rearm. That would automatically add the outside world to the 60% of the home population who were against the Hitler government. Besides, who were the people who had suddenly started voting Nazi in the last 3 years? Misguided ignoramuses, for the most part, victims of propaganda, a fluctuating mass that would fall apart at the first disappointment. No, all things considered, this government was not a cause for alarm. The only question was what would come after it. It was possible that they would drive the country to civil war. The communists were capable of going on the attack before a prohibition against them came into force. The next day, this turned out to be the general opinion of the intelligent press. It is curious how plausible an argument it is, even today, when we know what came next. How could things turn out so completely different? Perhaps it was just because we were all so certain that they could not do so, and relied on that with far too much confidence. So we neglected to consider that it might, if worse came to worse, be necessary to prevent the disaster from happening. Through the whole of February 1933, everything that happened remained a matter for the press. In other words, it took place in an arena that would lose all reality for 99% of the population. For 99% of the population, the moment there were no newspapers. Admittedly, enough occurred in that arena. The Reichstag was dissolved. Then in a flagrant breach of the Constitution, Hindenburg also dissolved the Prussian regional parliament. There were fast and furious changes of personnel in the civil service. The book defined Hitler.
Extinction. While we're dealing with COVID-19, we're also hurtling toward extinction. Dr. Justin Frank drops by saying Trump could see dead bodies from coronavirus and just step over them. What? Also, Greg Palast explains the secret history of the Deepwater Horizon, BP's second blowout. It's the 10-year anniversary for Deepwater Horizon's debacle. Find The Science Revolution wherever fine podcasts are available. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Hey, the Defense Department has confirmed what, to quote the New York Times, what seekers of extraterrestrial life have long hoped to be true. You know those videos from 2004 and 2015 by Navy pilots showing what looks like UFOs, in one case chasing them? The Pentagon has released them officially, and they said they're doing this to, quote, clear up any misconceptions. So it's kind of cool stuff. Let's see here. Jane in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Hey, Jane, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. So I've just been really appalled by the behavior of my fellow Democrats in their reaction to the Tara Reade allegations. I started out, I read the article in Newsweek, I read the article in New York Times, and it just seemed like there was a significant amount of corroboration for her story. And I'm just kind of wondering what your take is on the whole thing. I mean, it just seems like people are so just eager to poke holes in her story, to listen to anything that might be a minor inconsistency. And, I mean, as a woman in her 50s, I mean, a lot of us, you know, lived through that era, were sexually assaulted to one degree or another. I mean, it was not uncommon behavior, sad to say. And I don't remember every detail. I don't remember every year. I don't remember every place. Do you know what I mean? And to sit there and say, well, she can't remember every single detail. We can't find this document. I'm just disgusted and wondering what your thoughts are.
Well, I'll share some data points with you and then ask you what you think given this information. First of all, she went to Ronan Farrow, and he looked into the story and said, no, I'm not going to do this. Jodi Kantor and Megan Twohey, the New York Times reporters who won a Pulitzer Prize for taking down Harvey Wasserman, they investigated her story and refused to report on it. Harvey Weinstein, excuse me. She, in 2009, wrote a number of things praising Joe Biden for his work on the Violence Against Women Act. The Time's Up Legal Defense Fund referred her to multiple attorneys at the National Women's Law Center. The National Women's Law Center looked into what she was saying, and they declined to work with her because they said, quote, she was requesting PR assistance rather than legal representation. Her former employer says that, by the way, who is a person that she, well, in fact, let me back up. These are the people that she has in public or in court on various occasions in the past accused of sexual assault. Her father, her ex-husband, her former employer, Crystal Rojas, who has released documents showing that she was embezzling from the company, that Tara Reid was, a YAWCA supervisor, her former business partner, Frankie Knight, and now Joe Biden. And by the way, her allegations against Joe Biden didn't come out until the day after Joe Biden announced that he was definitely running for president. Initially, she said that Biden had made her uncomfortable by touching her shoulders. She then changed that claim, saying that he had complimented her legs, and then she upped the ante immediately after Biden was named the Democratic nominee, you know, with he attacked me with his fingers thing. And in 2018, she was writing multiple gushing posts praising Vladimir Putin, some that were reprinted in Russian. And, I look at all that stuff, and I watched Joe Biden this morning on Morning Joe say, this never happened, period, full stop. And I'm frankly more inclined to believe Biden than Reid at this point, but I'm keeping an open mind, assuming that there will be people doing a deeper dive into this than has been done so far.
Okay.
Given
well, I mean,
what do you think, Jane?
Well, I was already familiar with the vast majority.
And
of what
she's going to be on Fox News this weekend, by the way.
Right. Yes, and I know Fox News has definitely picked up on the story quite a bit. I'm familiar with that, and I'm not a fan of Fox. But I was familiar with a lot of that. I did see a really interesting interview today on Democracy Now! With Rich McHugh, former NBC producer, and he basically said, we're never going to really know for sure. But I guess my concern, honestly, is just more at the attitude of Democrats and just saying and just being so eager to to poke holes in her story and just to glom on to anything that makes it seem like she's less than.
Well, I'm not trying to circle the herd or circle the wagons here around Joe Biden. I mean, if there was any evidence of this, I would be frankly very happy if Joe Biden dropped out and was replaced by Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, who would be the two leading candidates I would think to replace him.
Yes, amen.
Because they align with my politics more than he does. But that said, I think and Biden made this point this morning on television that when women come forward with accusations, they should be believed, and the accusation should be investigated, and then you determine whether there's evidence that supports them or evidence that suggests that there's something going on here beyond just an honest person making an honest accusation. And in this case, I'm concerned that that's the way it's going. But like I said, let's keep an open mind for another week or two. I'm sure that there's a lot of journalists who are digging into this very aggressively, not just into Tara Reid, but into Joe Biden. And I think Biden also shot himself in the foot this morning when Mika Brzezinski, he said that all of the personnel records from when he was in the Senate are in the National Archives, which is true. And he asked the National Archives to pull out all of the personnel records from all the years he was in the Senate and see if anybody ever accused him of sexual assault, and specifically pull out all the stuff that has to do with Tara Reid. So, presumably that's going forward. But then, Mika, your papers from your time in the Senate and in the White House as vice president. Those papers are in a basement at the University of Delaware, and they will be released after you're no longer in public office. And he made the point that among those papers are things like transcripts of private conversations with world leaders that really should not be released. And certainly all the position papers and all the work that they did over the years, pro and con on all kinds of issues. He said, this stuff could be cherry-picked and used against me in the election. And he wasn't talking about Tara Reid. He was talking, maybe it was the Anita Hill story. God only knows, right? But he was saying, but what he didn't say, and I kept waiting for him to say it, was this, because Mika was like, well, can't they just do a keyword search of it for Tara Reid? And it's almost certainly not in a digital form. What I read was that there were 14 filing cabinets full of this stuff. And, so it's a massive amount of paper. And it would take probably months to go through and look for anything relating to her. And he was like, there's no there, number one. And number two, that's confidential stuff that nobody should be going through right now, not until I'm out of public office. And, I get what he's saying, but I think what he should have said, just looking at this from publicity point of view, what he should have said is, I think the University of Delaware should designate a person who's nonpartisan and who's not political and who's a good researcher and have them go through that material looking for anything that has to do with Tara Reid. They won't find anything there, but they should have them do that. And instead, he said he wouldn't authorize that. I'm guessing he's going to change his tune on that, because that's going to be the thing that they're going to be beating him up with over on Fox News, is he won't release his papers. And it's going to become the new Hillary email thing, in my opinion.
Right.
So anyhow, that's my 30,000-foot view here, Jane.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I do still find her story credible, just so you know, but I appreciate your viewpoint.
Yep. Yeah, thank you, Jane.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
Good talking
Bye-bye.
with you. George in Rapid City, South Dakota. Hey, George, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for everything you do. And had a couple of quick things. One, you had a caller earlier today that was from California wanting to know how to help progressive candidates. And I think through the group Our Revolution, I think with Larry Cohen, I'm pretty sure they promote all the progressive candidates, so that could be an option for her. So, and that was one thing. And the other thing was the Michigan debacle, whatever you want to call it, at the Capitol.
It was a terrorist act, is what it was. I mean, let's call it what it was. People show up with guns and put their face 2 inches from you and start screaming at you because they want you to change public policy as a result of their actions. That's called terrorism.
Right. And do you think some of these are crisis actors?
No. I think these, I grew up in Michigan. The Michigan militia is actually a thing. It's one of the better organized militias in the United States. And, it's basically the modern version of the old Klan.
Wow. All right. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah. Thank you. Take a look at the video of that thing. It was nuts. Lawrence Lawrence in St. Paul. Hey, Lawrence, what's up?
All right. Always a pleasure. Hey, just a real quick aside here. Talking to your former caller, Katie, and the last one. This is typically why the Democrats lose. We never coalesce around anything that's significant. Katie was talking about how come we don't prosecute these Republican parties. Let me give you a famous quote from one of the finest intellectuals I know. This intellectual said, well, the Republicans have a tendency to raise the deficit beyond belief, and then when a Democrat gets in office, they just blame the Democrats, and it works. You know who that famous quote was by? Thom Hartmann.
No. Oh, yeah, there you go, Lawrence. And that's what they're going to do. I mean, Mitch McConnell is saying right now, no more money for anybody unless we get a limitation on liability for employers and companies. I mean, he's just like, so if people die, they don't have a right to sue, right? It's crazy. And then, of course, he's starting to talk about the deficit, too.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We can't help people, says Mitch McTurtle, because the country's in debt. And welcome back. Zach in North Hollywood. Hey, Zach, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's up?
Good morning, Tom. You know, we're going headlong straight into an election right now, and we've got to start talking straight with each other. And I'm going to try to do that now. You know, right now, all due respect to Joe Biden, he's a cigar store Indian that the center pushed out on rollers, and he's got a "Not Trump" sign hanging around his neck. We need a solid three-plank platform that's 1, 2, 3. Abolish the Electoral College, which promotes stolen elections and obstructs progress. Number 2, revoke the phony Nixon DOJ OLC memo that promotes corruption and fascism, and establish the post office as a not only unconditionally protected entity, but going all electric and becoming the only in all states, so we can protect the count and protect the recount if necessary, and move to establish a truly democratic majority wins voting structure like the Greeks.
I like it.
Yeah,
I like it, Zach, and you know, it's a great start. And this is where I'm just really hopeful that Joe Biden picks a good progressive for VP, and in fact there's I think I printed it out. In fact, there is some. Yeah, here we go. Elizabeth Warren would best unite the party for Joe Biden. This is a new survey that comes out of Data for Progress. Data for Progress did a poll and said, which of the following Democrats would you like to see elected as vice presidential candidate? And the top line is that Warren got 31% of the vote, Harris got 18%, Abrams and Klobuchar each got 10%, and Christy Todd Whitman got 3%. In particular, Warren's numbers were high in the under 45 crowd, but she beat everybody right across the board. She was the highest in support by black people, the highest in support by white people, the highest in support by Sanders supporters, the highest in support of Biden supporters, the highest among men, the highest among women. That was Warren.
I love
Elizabeth Warren in every one of those categories.
I love it. Tom, can I say one more thing? Can I say just one more thing? I love the idea of Elizabeth Warren. And, you know, these three subjects I mentioned need debate. These things need debate. You know, we need to get it out front and make this our platform. The Electoral College, the DOJ memo, and the post office. I mean, everybody should call in with their top three.
Yeah, that's a good list, and having three is a good idea.
Everybody start calling in with their top three planks, and I think we're going to get somewhere.
Yeah.
Thanks, friend.
I believe you're right. Thanks, Zach. Good talking to you.
Friend.
This poll, by the way, is reprinted over at Daily Kos. Marcos Melitsas himself wrote the article around it. He says Biden is shrugging off anyone vocalizing discontent with Warren. That's good. He's plowing ahead with appeasing progressives who backed her campaign. He's hired 2 Warren staffers for his fundraising team. He's putting anti-Wall Street former staffer Ted Kaufman, the guy who replaced him in the Senate, in charge of his presidential transition team. These are all good signs. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Stick around. We'll be right back. Did you know that Ronald Reagan committed treason to become president in 1980 and George Herbert Walker Bush was in on it and he avoided being prosecuted for this in 1992 with a little help from Bill Barr? It's on page 116 of my book, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America. So there's a new poll out. I was just talking with Zach from Hollywood about this new poll from Data for Progress. They commissioned a nationwide poll, and what they found was that, and the question was, which of the following Democrats would you like to see selected as Joe Biden's vice presidential candidate? And it was Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, Stacey Abrams, Amy Klobuchar, and Christy Todd Whitman were the 5 women that they put forward. because Biden has said he's going to pick a woman. And this is really interesting. The top line, this is the aggregate vote. Whitman got 3% of the vote. Klobuchar and Abrams both got 10%. Kamala Harris got 18%. Elizabeth Warren got 31%. And this is under women. Warren is number one as the pick for VP, 31. The next highest is Harris at 17. Under men, Warren is the highest at 30. The next highest is Harris at 21. And I'm starting to wonder if these are percentages or if these are votes. I don't know. But in any case, under men, Warren wins. Under people under 45, it was 32 Warren, 19 to Harris, and then 8, and 4 for Abrams, Klobuchar, and Whitman. Among people who were black people, it was 22, African Americans, 22% for Warren, 22% for Harris, 17% for Abrams, 11% for Klobuchar, 4% for Whitman. Among white people, it was 34% or 34 for Warren, 17 for Harris, 8 for Abrams, 11 for Klobuchar. Among Sanders supporters, it was 39 for Warren, 17 for Harris, 8 for Abrams, 10 for Klobuchar, 3 for Whitman. And among Biden supporters, and this is a really important group to look at, people who just are in love with Joe Biden. Whitman got 4%, Klobuchar got 11, or maybe it's votes. Klobuchar got 11, Abrams got 10, Harris got 22, but Elizabeth Warren got 30. So Elizabeth Warren literally won every single category: female, male, under 45, black, white, Sanders, and Biden supporters. And, so I put that out there for your consideration. All righty, let's see here. Liz in Mesa, Arizona. Hey, Liz, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. In Mesa, I have been writing letters to voters that do not register by mail. I have a list of Democrats, and I send them a form. I have learned the hard way that it's not realistic to ask a voter to go online and download a form. So I mail them this form so they can mail it to their election board to vote by mail. So in that way, I can reach out to people. It then shows Democrats are helpful and we really care about you. You really matter to us.
That's marvelous, Liz. That is absolutely marvelous. Where are you getting your list of potential voters? Is this among friends and family who are not registered to vote?
Oh, no, I'm very involved in my local Democratic Party.
Oh, so they're giving you a list.
I would be canvassing these voters. I would be going to their houses and asking them to vote by mail, but I can't. And this is, if you vote by mail, you have 70% voter turnout. So your local Democratic Party is very helpful.
Yeah, there you go. Liz, good on you. I tip my hat to you. Thank you so much for the call and for the story. Denise in Calumet, Michigan. Hey, Denise, what's on your mind today?
Well, Tom, I have a beautiful story for a change. I was going to the grocery store, and a father with 3 children was trying to get masks on his children. And the one little girl, she must have been about 6, was screaming, "No, Daddy, no!" So I got out of my car and I put my mask on. And she looked at me, and then she stopped crying. She put her mask on. And all the while I was in the grocery store, this little girl just popped out of nowhere. And finally she was backing up and keeping her distance, but then she said, "Thank you for wearing your mask. You made me comfortable."
Oh, that's sweet. That's sweet.
Yep. And, this happened a while back, and I've shared it on Facebook. People where I live, I'm in super upper Michigan, up in the Houghton and Keweenaw counties, and they're not masking. Our local township park, they're tailgating and partying every warm day. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So I'm just I'm just really happy that one little girl thought it and looked at me and didn't. It's just kind of cute.
That is so sweet. I would have been inclined maybe to even say something like, big people put masks on.
I know. I can't remember what I said to her, but it was like those little eyes were just looking at me with such adoration. And I'll never forget it. It was just, she was so sweet. She was so cute. And, this other topic about this woman
Tara Reid?
The Joe Biden story, the Tara Reid.
Yeah.
I was assaulted when I was 18. I remember every second of it. I've never forgotten any second of it, and that story never changed. Back when I was 17 and 74, I didn't do anything about it because what are you going to do when you're in the 70s? It's going to be your fault no matter what. So I never did anything about it. But I don't believe this woman because her story's changed too many times, and I really think that the Republicans or Trump or somebody's paying her. That's just my thought.
Well, I don't know that it's that. I think if she is not telling the truth, if that's what comes out, then I would probably guess that she's just a very troubled individual. I mean, keep in mind all the people that she has accused of this. You know,
exactly.
Former employer, former business partner, her former husband, her father, and several other people.
It happened to me once, and I didn't forget one detail. And just one time, I never let it happen again. So, you know what I'm saying?
Well, there you go. I do. Denise, thank you for the call. But we'll see. I mean, Tara Reid deserves her day in court, as it were. Although there's no court to be involved here, but she deserves, for unbiased, impartial parties to carefully look into her story. And if there's anything to it, Joe Biden should step down. We'll be back. It's Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
Right-wing Republicans and corporate Democrats have become a pathetic bunch of no-can-do's, faced with an economy reeling from the plutocratic policies that...
Hi, thank you. Eviction moratorium is not enough. The 19,000 and counting